Hello, good evening, everyone. We acknowledge that the land upon which we meet today is the traditional unceded homeland of the Mi'kmaq. To honor the Mi'kmaq past, present, and future who have stewarded these lands for all generations, may our journey include being respectful and thankful for the welcoming we have received on these lands. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Tracy Williams, and on behalf of the Chamber, welcome you all to the Kings-Hants Candidates Forum for the upcoming 2025 federal election. Unfortunately, our partner this evening, Pat Healy of the Laker News, could not attend tonight, but he sends his regrets and appreciates everyone for being here. We're thrilled to see such a strong turnout from our community. It shows the importance of this election and your commitment to being informed voters in Kings-Hants, in East Hants. I'd like to thank the candidates for joining us tonight. The Liberal Party candidate, Kody Blois, the NDP candidate, Paul Doerr, the Green Party candidate, Karen Beazley, and the People's Party of Canada candidate, Alex Cargill. Thank you all for being here and putting your name forward. We had hoped to have all the candidates here for you tonight. However, the Conservative candidate, Joe Hirtle, declined and I know there was a lot of speculation going around, so to answer why he hasn't been able to make it, I would like to read the following reply from Stephen Ford, his campaign manager. As we are currently in the midst of a very active campaign period, Joel's schedule is focused heavily on meeting with individual voters, communicating our platform, how it pertains to the riding, while also listening to their concerns firsthand. With that in mind, we would be pleased to coordinate a visit with your chamber following the conclusion of the election, when he'll have more opportunity to engage in meaningful conversations with organizations like yours. So tonight's forum is made up of 13 questions selected from those submitted from chamber members and the greater business community. There will be no questions from the floor tonight. Believing a forum offers a more positive stage for candidates to present their parties effectively, the chamber chooses this format over a debate style, which has a potential to be more adversarial in nature. So thank you once again for being here. We look forward to hearing an insightful evening. And now I'd like to introduce your moderator for this evening, Greg Roach of Caldwell Roach Insurance, and they're celebrating 60 years in business, by the way, just a little. Thank you, Greg. All right. Thank you, Greg.
Okay, thanks, Tracy, and thanks for the plug. So, geez, hecklers out here tonight. Hopefully they go easier on the candidates. Okay, thank you all. To remind the candidates, and for those of you here tonight or watching the recording, the forum will run as follows. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for opening remarks, followed by 13 rounds of questions, and then 2 minutes for closing remarks. Each candidate has 1.5 minutes to answer the same question. Order of candidates was randomly selected, and we will rotate with each new question from my right to the left. The timekeeper will hold up a sign at 1 minute mark and at the 1:20 mark. The mic will be shut off at 1:30. Each round should last a maximum of 8 minutes. If everybody's ready, we'll begin. So, Alex, you have the opportunity to start your opening remarks.
Perfect. Thanks. I'm Alex Cargill, representing People's Party of Canada. I didn't want to run to become a politician. I'm like a lot of people that just want to live a quiet life and be left alone by government and have minimal involvement with them. But it turns out that they have an agenda called Agenda 2030 that keeps intruding in our lives and making our energy incredibly expensive. And a lot of things made me run for the People's Party of Canada. And after having a talk with Max Bernier, he agreed that we do need representation in Kings-Hants, and I'm happy to do it because no one else is representing the interests that I hold dear. And what I would like is, first of all, I'm a father of 3, and my wife Beth is here with me tonight, and we come from Ajax, Ontario. I know, please don't judge, but we're happy to be here. It's the most beautiful place we've ever seen, and we intend to plant our roots here everlasting. So what I want in this community is to protect it from what has been happening around the world when we get on board with global initiatives that put our people last. We cannot bear the weight of any more virtue signals that are trying to save the planet, and in a planetary utopia, it's becoming a dystopia for the people that have to pay high energy costs, that are struggling to pay their next grocery bill or decide if they can heat their home with all of these initiatives. They really sound great, but it is the road to ruin, and no one has expressed that desire in our political class. There are many tough issues that need to be dealt with, and I don't find anyone doing anything but talking about platitudes and discussing how they will further divvy up the money that we don't have, further adding to a debt that we service of $1 billion a week, going to service the debt that we've accrued through 10 years of a nightmarish liberal agenda. Now, I salute Kody for standing up for farmers here, but it is part of their plan, and the exemptions to the liberal agenda can only last so long before you're going to start seeing farmers' protests in Canada, much like they're seeing across Europe right now.
Thank you, Alex. Kody, would you like to go next?
Thank you very much, Greg. It's a privilege to be here right at home, and most of you may know me, but for those that don't, I grew up right here in East Hants in Lance, and really proud to call Hants County home. And I want to start by saying thanks. Thank you to the East Hants Chamber of Commerce for hosting this forum. Thank you to everyone who's here tonight and to those who are tuning in online, who are taking an interest in what's happening in our country, what's happening in our province, and ultimately in our communities, because it is an engaged citizenry that is extremely important, and it is the foundation of Canada, is our democracy. This is a very crucial time for Canada. We are facing probably one of the most credible threats to our economic and political sovereignty, maybe in the history of the country, but certainly in the last 100 years from what we're seeing south of our border from President Trump. And the tariffs that are being applied to our exports in an environment where the Americans are our largest trading partner, it means that we have to be able to have the ability to pivot as a country, to be able to find other export markets around the world, whether that be in Europe, whether that be in the Indo-Pacific. And we also have to drive a domestic policy change agenda here at home as well, around housing, around driving the economic growth that is going to be necessary to help support the social programs that we've introduced, that I think are extremely important, and we should all be very proud as Canadians having these programs in place that take care of everyday Canadians. But ultimately, we are electing a member of Parliament. And while, yes, we are going to look into the national leaders and the platforms, this is ultimately about who your voice is in Kings-Hants. I'm very pleased to have had the privilege for the past 5.5 years to serve in this capacity. I've learned a lot. Obviously, the Prime Minister asked me to serve in Cabinet as the Minister of Agriculture before the dissolution of Parliament. I want to keep bringing your voice to Ottawa. I want to keep working as hard as I can. Thank you. Look forward to tonight's debate.
Thank you, Kody. Karen Beazley.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce and Lakers News for organizing this tonight. Thanks to all of you for coming out and to my fellow candidates here. I too am from Hants County. I'm born and raised in Windsor, Nova Scotia, and now live there upon my retirement. Come from a small family business. My family had a funeral home in Windsor. I worked for 10 years as a landscape architect in Ontario, and then moved back to Nova Scotia because I always wanted to come back home. So I did, went to Dalhousie University, and have ended up being a professor there for the last 25 years in the School for Resource and Environmental Studies at Dalhousie University. I'm now retired, but I remain engaged there as a professor emerita. I still have some graduate students, so it keeps me busy. But now that I'm retired, I have more time and energy to devote and give back to my community. So that's why I've decided to pitch my name up, run for the Green Party. Now, why the Green Party? Well, we are living at a time of planetary limits where the future of our planet and our communities are at stake because we are exceeding the planetary limits for climate and biological diversity. So if we don't have those kinds of livable planet, there's no hope in having an economy. So we're not looking for Eden, we're looking for a livable planet. So as we prepare to build alliances to work together for a livable future, I'm happy to serve this community. I would be a champion for you and work collaboratively with others to make our communities better.
Thank you, Karen. Paul Doerr.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Paul Doerr. I am the NDP candidate in Kings-Hants. I also was born in Bruce County, southwestern Ontario. Lived in British Columbia for a couple of years, back to Ontario. I always like to say that in 1996, can you hear me? In 1996, I came to my senses and moved to Nova Scotia. It was a job offer, actually, at Acadia University, and I've been teaching and working at Acadia since then. My research and teaching career has focused on the international history of the 20th century, especially the 1930s. My grandparents used to call them the dirty 30s. And this has led me to be hyper aware of the dangers of authoritarianism, fascism, and the danger to our fragile democracies. What else can I tell you? I'm a father. I named my cat after Jack Layton. I also published a very exciting book on British foreign policy. It's Amazon.ca. Just a plug there, right? Over the years, I found I have a special passion for human rights and social justice. And this has led me to align myself with Canada's New Democrats, whom I feel most closely reflect my personal values. In the next Parliament, the New Democrats promise to focus on some fairly crucial issues that we feel are valuable to the future of the country. These would include issues like national rent control, family doctor for every Canadian. What does that mean, 30 seconds? Oh, God. Okay. This is really stressful. Universal pharmacare, Indigenous rights, water and environmental protections, and a few other things that we can discuss as we go along. And finally, two other issues that are very close to my heart. Ukraine, which cannot be allowed to fall, and Gaza, where the violence needs to stop. I hope we can discuss those. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you, Paul. Okay, we'll begin the question round. Kody, you're going to start us off, and actually you'll have a chance to build on your opening remarks. Very general question. Why did you want to put your name forward in this race?
Thank you very much. Look, I got into political life because I had been interested in serving my community. I grew up in a working class family. My dad drove a truck. My mom's an administrative assistant still up at Maple Ridge in Lance. I sometimes joke she's my greatest political asset because she knows everyone that's gone through the school system over the years. But sport was my whole world at a young age. I was a competitive hockey player. I played softball. And when I was in my early 20s, you start to reflect upon the people that were there to help support you along the way. And East-Hants has a real volunteer culture. People want to give back to their community. I started by doing that by volunteering with the East-Hants Minor Hockey Association. Those young novice and peewee kids are now like 21, 22 and 6 feet tall. But that's how I started. I got involved with the East-Hants Sport Heritage Society by helping to create that organization, the Come Home East-Hants Association, and the East-Hants Sport Infrastructure Association, which still remains a bit of a priority I'd like to see done. And ultimately, with my background in public administration and law, that's why I got into public life. I'm proud of the work that I've done over the past 5.5 years. I would like to continue to have the privilege of serving this community. I think there's some real strong priorities around more affordable housing and transit, which I hope we can dig into a little bit in the round of questioning. But, you know, I'm sitting as a member in the Privy Council, and I would certainly like to be able to have the opportunity under a Mark Carney-led government to be able to do good for the country, but also our constituents here in Kings-Hants. Thank you.
Thanks, Kody. Okay, Karen, why did you put your name forward?
Thank you. I wasn't sure this was working, but it definitely is now, so sorry about the pause. I definitely found that for me, there was not enough emphasis on protecting the environment, making sure we have a livable future for our children, our grandchildren, and all future generations. And not just for people, but for other species, because we have these 3 crises on Earth at the moment. One is the biodiversity crisis, one is the climate crisis, and the other are the humanitarian crises. So moving forward, we need to address all 3 of those simultaneously, because we will be reaching some significant limits within the next term of this government. So that was one of the reasons I found that, inputting into democratic processes wasn't getting too much change happening, so I thought I'll put input in another way. The other aspect is what Kody has suggested, giving back to the community. I've worked hard all my life in the university and elsewhere, and now I have the energy and time to give back to the broader community that has been really good to me. I have transferable skills that I developed through all that could apply to the job. So leadership, planning, management, those sorts of things. So I'd be happy to serve you in the community.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
Well, I've always been interested in politics since I was a kid. When I was growing up in our house, everything came to a screeching halt at 6 p.m. every night when the CBC News came on, and my father would put it on with great ceremony, and we'd all have to sit there and listen to it. So I grew up hearing about all the great landmarks of the 20th century, last century, Vietnam War, civil rights, all that sort of thing. So I've always been interested in politics. When I went to university, I got interested in or active in the NDP organization at my University of Waterloo. That continued through my career. I've always been active in elections. I've been active in NDP associations in all 3 provinces that I've lived in. I finally decided to put my name forward in this election because it's a particularly crucial election. I want to be sure that as we go forward in the coming years, that we have a strong social safety net in this country, one that provides for adequate universal health care, one that provides for strong communities, and especially the belief that no one should be left behind. And I believe, like I said before, that the NDP is best placed to reflect those values.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Alex?
Yeah, I'm running because, and first of all, I'm very impressed by all the credentials of the co-candidates here. But the reason I'm running is because I feel like I'm in touch with the average person that feels like these goals that we have are not ones that we agreed to, and that people are having trouble deciding if they get groceries or heat their home, and whether we can lower the temperature of the Earth in 100 years is something that if we remove 1.5% of the Earth's carbon and the other side of the planet is jacking it up because they're taking all of our manufacturing because we're pricing ourselves out of the equation. At some point, I feel that the everyman needs to be represented because we can't keep the burden of these virtue signals of us leaking money to Earth without focusing on Canadians. I want to focus on our social programs. I want to focus on our homelessness and the drug addiction and the lack of purpose. There are major issues, but none of them can be discussed by these well-credentialed people with me, and I want to be discussing them. I want to talk about immigration and not just say that it's housing that is the problem when we just build more houses. Not everyone wants our population to keep exploding. I want to see the crisis managed with what we have right now and not further increase it. I want to close the doors. PPC believes in a moratorium on immigration, and that's something that I support a great deal. I grew up in a multi-ethnic suburb where we didn't have this lens of class system on each other, looking at each other as marginalized groups. We all got along. I have faith in humanity to get along without government intervention.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, Karen, the second question is for you. I just want to remind the candidates as well, feel free to ask me to repeat any question if you don't remember it, or even if you want more time.
Thank you. Good hint.
So, Karen, how would you foster innovation and support new local industries to ensure Kings-Hants remains competitive and adaptable in a rapidly changing economy?
Okay, foster innovation and
Support new local industries.
new local industries. Yeah, so Canada scores really well on the innovation side of things when it comes to research and coming up with new ideas, but where we lack a bit is in transferring those ideas into production, manufacturing, and real jobs. So more attention brought to how to be innovative in making that leap from the idea to the actual application here in Kings-Hants. So, you know, a couple of examples that might be brought to bear there are adding value to the kind of raw resources that we have here, the forest industry, the agricultural industry, adding value by keeping the production here, making and manufacturing things here, adding value to the agricultural products to create products that have more value. So moving into organic agriculture and adding value to the produce in that way. So these ideas have been applied in other countries, and they end up bringing 4, 5, 9 times more income than the original raw material.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Paul?
Well, I think we have a variety of innovative ideas that would accomplish these aims. We would, first of all, we favor retaliatory tariffs. The revenues from those tariffs, we believe, should go to support displaced workers, but also they could be used to support small businesses, which are going to be under stress in this trade war that we did not start. We think we need to solve the problem of patchy internet and cell phone coverage in large areas of this country, which still remains a problem for many businesses. We're well into the new century now, and still we struggle to accomplish that. We have an ambitious housing program to build no houses. We have to have houses. We can't have people sleeping in the street. That we believe would generate jobs and demand there. We also would favor that we would prioritize the construction of an east-west energy grid, which likewise would support small businesses. We would and also favor Canadian companies in bidding for projects in Canada, companies that could provide, fulfill government contracts. And that's 30 seconds, right? Fulfill government contracts. Those contracts should go to Canadian companies as much as possible. We also require that only Canadian steel should be used in federally funded infrastructure projects as well. So, like I said, a variety of ideas that we have that would be beneficial to small businesses.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Alex?
Yeah, basically it would be get out of the way of entrepreneurs and stop acting like we need the government to innovate green new technology. This is something that if you develop a car that uses less fuel or has a more efficient battery, the free market itself will favor your product. There's no need to call in the geniuses of the government to decide winners and losers on what needs to be innovated. It's our job to set up an environment where things are fair for all, and it's an environment people want to come to. Engaging in a futile trade war with a hyperpower to our south that is a natural ally, despite spasms from Donald Trump, which I do not agree with. I just think we need to let the emotions pass and have a little bit of sense in dealing with the Americans. And retaliatory tariffs are only going to punish ourselves. Let the Americans tax themselves with their tariffs on their side. Don't respond in kind. Realize what initiated the tariffs, and that would be we want a solid border that's not leaking fentanyl and human trafficking, and we also want free trade. Now, that is something that can't be put on the table so long as we have supply management in our dairy industry, and that is something that I know dairy farmers are concerned about, but there are ways that the PBC has put forward where we can ameliorate that by saying it'll be phased out, and it's not like they're going to be left in the lurch. America subsidizes their dairy industry. Canada can do the same, but to hold everything up and to run headlong into a wall with the U.S. in a trade war we cannot win, we bring it to the table, free trade, and this diffuses the whole situation, and we get back to being a profitable country.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
So look, I'm going to focus on 4 priorities because 90 seconds isn't a lot of time, but this is a really important question. So here in Kings-Hants, and particularly in Hants County, our forestry sector is absolutely crucial. And when we talk about innovation and new industries, where I think is a great example is the $215 million proposed facility on mass timber construction right in the Elmsdale Business Park. Now, we were able to provide $10 million of federal support to help catalyze the private investment that is going to be needed to build that facility. That's a great opportunity to use Nova Scotia wood fiber right here from Hants County to build the housing that we need. There's also an opportunity around sustainable jet fuel to be able to use the wood vinegars to be able to play into that market that I think is absolutely crucial. On agriculture, we need secondary processing. I had a conversation with Ralph Ballum, dairy farmer from Shubenacadie. If you talk to the dairy farmers here in this area, what they're worried about is a deindustrialization over time of our secondary processing. That would certainly be a priority for me as the Member of Parliament, and obviously as the Minister of Agriculture if the Prime Minister keeps me in that role. Capital gains, we are proposing to go back to the 50% inclusion, but also keep the 1.25 million lifetime capital exemption, which is crucial for small business, including driving innovation. Last is around the Airport Authority. We have a tremendous federal asset right there on our doorstep. We have a great opportunity for commercial development in that space to be able to actually look at the logistics hubs. We are perfectly situated in the middle of this province. We can continue to drive businesses around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kody. Okay, Paul, you're going to start us off on our 3rd question. So recognizing the challenge of unaffordable housing for single individuals, young families, and seniors, what are your proposed strategies to ensure more accessible and affordable home ownership and rental options for these residents in East Hants?
Right. Well, our housing program proposal would amount to $16 billion. It would be a strategy focused on building 3 million homes in the next 5 years. Government can not simply abandon its ambitions in this area. We have to provide, housing is a human right, okay? We've built the most prosperous and freest society in human history. I'm a historian, I take the long view here, and we should be able to make sure that all Canadians have adequate housing, and not the situation which we have now. I think it's regrettable that this situation has got so out of control. It's happened during the tenure of the current government, along with the affordability crisis, and that's, now they're asking for a 4th mandate, so we need to think about that. We would certainly focus on building rent-controlled homes. We think we could use Crown land to build rent-controlled housing. We would stop corporations from scooping up affordable homes, as they have been doing. We'd support first-time home buyers with CMHC-backed mortgages, and, of course, a program of national rent control. I'm doing pretty good with the timing, actually. Not bad.
Thank you, Paul. Alex?
Basically, with the housing crisis, no party but PPC is going to address that it's a supply and demand. They address supply, they don't address demand. There's no way we can cap this. There's no way we can build the homes required to lower the housing costs unless we stop the manic immigration levels that are coming into this country. There's absolutely no justifiable reason for it. We've reached a crisis point. In 2023, 98% of Canada's growth was through immigration. There's no thought for demographic effects of this. There's no thought for the cultural fabric. We do deserve to have a culture that exists here. We're seeing enclaving with the amount of numbers that we're bringing in from countries across the world and preferring certain countries. So now we see Hindu versus Sikh proxy wars breaking out in our streets, and this is all competing for a housing market that we should be prioritizing for Canadians. There are people right now that have no hope of owning a home, and I believe it was a professor at University of BC that was did a Freedom of Information Act that said the Trudeau government needs to worry about young kids that are becoming disillusioned at the fact that they will never be able to own a home. And this is because we do not address the major issue. The elephant in the room is that we won't address the demand. We can cut the demand, by moratorium on immigration, and my party is the only one proposing that, and also looking at deportations of expired visas and expired temporary work permits, which no one else is talking about either, and that should scare people.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
Just want to tackle the immigration piece that Alex has raised. I think it's important to look historically. When you actually look at the numbers of the new arrivals in terms of into this country, not only does the business community actually need young, robust workers, not only from the country, and we've introduced those types of programs, but on a proportionate basis, the amount of people that have come to Canada over the last even, let's say, 10 years is less than other periods in time in our history since Confederation. So I think that's important to address. How are we going to build the more units that we need? Again, we have a plan that is actually working on that. Many in this room may not know that Nova Scotia had the most housing starts in 2024 since 1940. That is an important element in terms of the housing starts that are needed to be able to make sure that we have more supply. I would agree with Alex on the idea that the more supply is needed. Disagree certainly on the fact that we don't need immigration in this country. Absolutely would disagree there. And we also need targeted investments to help on affordability. And so we have been working with the provinces to do just that. What Mr. Carney is proposing is a $35 billion proposal to build 500,000 new homes every single year. Part of that is through modular housing. We have to get back to the ability to build on scale using some of the Nova Scotia forestry products I just talked about through mass timber. We have an opportunity to do this. We're also proposing to cut the GST up to $1 million on people who are buying a home for a first time. These are some of the measures that we can introduce, and 90 seconds is hard to explain it, Greg, but hopefully I did some justice to our policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kody. And Karen?
Very good, thank you. Yes, the Green Party is prepared to make the biggest public housing construction program investment since the 1970s. A lot of that would be related to generating energy-efficient homes, smaller homes that have that are going to be easier to afford to keep and stay in. Using covenants to make sure that housing that's built with public money stays affordable, closing loopholes to keep people from using buying houses as ways to launder money, eliminate the unfair tax advantages of real estate investment trusts, stop corporations from buying up single-family homes. So a lot of things like that. It also dovetails with other aspects of the Green Party plan, such as a guaranteed livable income, which will help people afford a home, as well as forwarding and things like intergenerational co-housing and modular building to make the building go quicker. There's also platforms pieces that look at how to increase the labor and skill force through training, how to keep it through job security, lowering barriers for people coming here to take up those trade jobs. So lots of ways to work towards this change.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, our fourth question. Kings-Hants has a diverse economy, including agriculture, natural resources, tourism, and small business. What specific policies will you advocate for at the federal level to support this diversity and create sustainable jobs in our community? And Alex, you'll start us off.
Well, basically, it would be eliminating policies that tend to intervene. Like I mentioned, what we've got is too much intervention into the economy and not enough faith in people and entrepreneurs to create businesses for themselves once it's profitable to do so. There is a thriving economy in agriculture, but it could be better. It could be not guided by saving the planet in 100 years, and all of these virtue signals seem to be costing us a lot, and we could have much more prosperity through the elimination of existing policies rather than enacting a new way to spend money from one place and give it to another. It's a zero-sum competition that we're doing, thinking that we're going to spend our way out of this. We need to stop the spending. So it's an inversion of the problem to say that a policy is going to save us. We are laden with policies, and all we do is promise to manage the chaos better in the future. So PBC's policy is to get out of the way after a year of keeping the corporate tax rate. It would be to lower it, but for the first year, the goal is to eliminate the deficits that have been run. So after that, it would be unleash the economy and lower personal income tax and lower corporate tax and make it a venue that people want to come to and want to have thriving business and also have more purchasing power through not spending our money and increasing the cost of everything through programs that we cannot sustain.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
Okay, so again, 90 seconds is tight. On tourism, we have a tremendous opportunity here in Hants County, one of the most beautiful shorelines, but also the most undeveloped shoreline in Nova Scotia is basically along the entire Hants shore. Now, we obviously have to do that in cooperation and consultation with local residents, but what a tremendous asset, highest tides in the world. That has to come with infrastructure that draws people there. It also has to come with, of course, the housing pieces that we talked about to ensure that the community has capacity. So that would be a priority for me with the tourism operators, particularly along the Hants shore. On forestry, I've talked about mass timber. I'd like to see that project get finalized and up and running here in Elmsdale. I think there's tremendous opportunities in conversations with the Ledwidge family about their innovation. Those are two major sawmills right here in East Hants that I want to help champion and work with them to see their innovation. I am an absolute champion for supply management. I believe in the importance of that system. We have the most supply managed farms east of Quebec right here in Kings-Hants. While I respect the fact that Mr. Cargill has a different position, I think it is untenable for a member of Parliament for Kings-Hants to not be out defending and working with our farmers who not only provide really crucial products, but is the lifeblood of our rural economy right here in Kings-Hants. On horticulture, I'd like to be able to work with the Nova Scotia apple industry to see more export markets, particularly Mexico. I've had constructive conversations with the Secretary of Agriculture for Mexico. Last is around housing on farm. I'd like to see an HST input tax credit for that infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Kody. Karen?
Yeah, the Green Party of Canada, of course, supports economic development, but it has to be environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable. So those three pillars need to come in. It means, so some ways to get to those are to promote the local supply chain. Local supply uses less carbon, less fuel, less energy. It uses resources that are nearby at hand and local. So local supply chains add a lot of value to the economy by keeping the money here at home a little more. Community-based supply chains directly employ more people and return more money to local economies. In the agricultural sector, I already mentioned a shift to organic agriculture that could result in less emissions, but also achieve 10% of the grocery market in Canada by 2030, which would be an increase from the current share of 3.4%. This would be supported by training and capacity building, investment in new equipment and other programs. The similar kind of changes we talked about in the forest industry, the high value added to that. And these could be further supported by introducing circular economy measures, which means use a lot more secondary resources instead of raw resources to keep the waste down and use more materials.
Thank you, Karen. And Paul?
I think this question, can I get the wording of the question again?
Sure. Kings-Hants has a diverse economy, including agriculture, natural resources, tourism, and small businesses. What specific policies will you advocate for at the federal level to support this diversity and create sustainable jobs in our community?
Okay, so I think it kind of repeats some of the points I made earlier, some general themes. So again, our building program, I think, would keep people working and spending money in their own communities. We want to see continued supports for businesses that are threatened in the trade war, which we did not cause, and we would not knuckle under to Trump. We would also cap this irritation I think that many businesses face. We would put a cap on high credit card merchant fees. That cap would be at a maximum of 1%. We also, in this province, used to have a rather thriving film sector, which I think was undercut by policies of the provincial government. I'd take a look at trying to restore that.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Okay, our fifth question. Recognizing the significant impact of taxation on the viability of small to mid-sized businesses, what are your concrete plans to lower the tax burden for SMEs in East-Hants? Kody?
Okay, and I'll quickly make some notes here. On taxation, extremely important. And so I've mentioned around the capital gains, the fact that Prime Minister Carney has walked back the policy of the Trudeau government back to a 50% inclusion. I believe it was the right decision. This is the type of activity that spurs small businesses. And small businesses here in Kings-Hants, they are the benevolent type of businesses that are giving back. They are the ones that contributed at Tidefest. They were the ones that helped contribute at the East-Hants Sport Hall of Fame or donate to the local hockey team. So particularly in rural areas, our small business community, going back to that 50% inclusion, I think is the right piece, but also keeping the lifetime capital gains exemption at $1.25 million is the right approach. It actually means that our capital gains policy is far more competitive than what it was even 6 months ago. In terms of what we're proposing, everyday Canadians, we're proposing a $875 tax credit every year for about 22 million Canadians. This is to offset the fact that the carbon price at the consumer level is being eliminated, but the rebates are not going back to households. These are things that ultimately did reward 8 out of 10 households. It was always going to be a difficult sell in rural Canada. You know the advocacy that I put forward to see national adjustments. I support Mr. Carney's plan. Last is around carbon pricing for certain small businesses. This was a challenge on taxation, and I think we made the right decision to go back to an industrial price.
Thank you, Kody. Karen?
Yeah, Canada, and Kings-Hants in particular, needs entrepreneurs and private sector investment, especially in small and medium-sized companies, and particularly in clean technology, as we diversify in those ways. 90% of business startups fail, so the Green Party of Canada would like to put forward a tax system that recognizes the risk for startups by reducing taxes and rewarding success for those businesses. This approach can be oriented towards startups that promote and implement clean technology to start. Another measure is to suspend all federal subsidies and tax incentives to corporations that are majority U.S. owned and redirect the money into Canadian-owned businesses. 70% of the Canadian oil and gas industry, for example, is owned by foreign investors, and most of them are U.S.-based, and there's a possibility of nationalizing our oil and gas industry and redirecting those monies into Canadian and, by transfer, Kings-Hants businesses.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
Just a side note to begin with, I never thought I'd actually say this, but I actually agree with the previous Liberal government's policy on the capital gains issue, but that be as it may. We don't think this is a time for wholesale massive tax cuts. I think we have issues with tax fairness in this country. We have families that are in enormous stress in many respects, people who feel themselves being gouged by grocery chains, people who see huge profits with large corporations and dodging taxes, especially with offshore tax havens. Previous government, or this party, the Liberal Party, previously promised to crack down on tax havens, but that doesn't seem to have happened. We would end the agreements that enable this mass, escape of taxes. The Canadian Treasury loses somewhere, I've seen astonishing numbers, somewhere between $24 and $39 billion a year because of offshore tax havens. That has to stop. The longer this goes on, the more you see a sense of unfairness in the country. People just, the resentment will build. So we have to have a tax system that will protect us, finance our social systems, protect people that way, and tax cuts for those at the bottom of the income level who most desperately need it, such as removal of GST on essential items.
Thank you, Paul. Alex?
Yeah, as mentioned before, PPC's stance is we need to eliminate the deficit, and that will be in the first year. There won't be an easing up. It will be taxation as normal, but there will be a reduction on corporate and personal income tax, as well as abolishing capital gains tax after the first year once it's under control. But drastic spending cuts are going to help this. The fact that the federal government is spending in all directions, we need to bring that money home for Canadians. I'm up for social programs. We do have freedom of movement within PPC to hold our own views, and my view is keep that money for Canadians. We're not just like the Conservatives that say Canada first. We're Canada only. We need to get Canadians back on their feet and back to thriving before we start thinking about releasing our money in other places. And as for the carbon pricing, it's not feasible, it's not working, and there's only so much that Canadians can take. It's like the book Animal Farm, where Boxer just keeps saying, I will work harder. I really do not like that Canadians are being taken advantage of their trust and faith in government that they will do the right thing if we keep paying this carbon tax. We're in no shape to be doing it right now. We need a break. We need a breather from this. Once we're back on our feet, we should have an open and robust discussion about where to use our funds. But for right now, it's not the time.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, funny how this is lining up. Karen, you're going to start us off on our next question. The last few years alone, we've had Hurricane Fiona, wildfires, and floods, and failed agricultural crops, which have had tremendous negative impact on the economy and livelihood of business owners. Now that the carbon tax has been cancelled, how does Canada address climate change?
So, climate change is a multifaceted kind of issue that needs multiple fronts to address. Canada, the Green Party would want to see the reduction of subsidies to oil and gas industries and more subsidies going to clean technologies, the reduction of fossil fuels use across all kinds of industries and the replacement with clean technologies, nature-based solutions that will store carbon and sequester carbon from the atmosphere, and other kind of solutions like that. Now, in order to get to those things, we need to change the way we build our houses. While we continue to build roads, we need to also provide avenues for other kinds of transportation, walking, cycling. There's just a myriad of aspects towards it. Those are just a few things that I mentioned.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
Right. Well, first of all, we do have a climate crisis. There's no sense sitting there and pretending that it doesn't exist. This country has the worst record in the G7 in terms of its environmental record. This has happened under the current government. Very regrettable. Our policy will be to force big polluters to pay, not people, not ordinary people. The burden should fall on big companies that do most of the pollution, should pay for that pollution. So we would favor keeping the industrial carbon tax as opposed to the family or personal carbon tax. We would cut $18 billion in oil and gas subsidies. We're against an LNG pipeline across Quebec. We believe firmly that Quebec should have the right to veto energy projects over its territory. That's essential for national unity. We are skeptical, if not outright opposed, to an Energy East project. Again, we would favor the creation of an east-west electricity grid. We would provide rebates for families that buy zero-emission vehicles. We provide for the retrofitting of millions of homes to make them energy efficient and therefore affordable. That would take a heavy burden off families in terms of heating their homes if the home was energy efficient. And further investments in clean energy, electric transit, and zero-emission vehicles.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Alex?
For the sake of debate, I'm not going to combat the notion that human-contributed CO2 emissions is causing the temperature to rise. But what I will say is that the methods being employed to combat it are utterly futile. Canada contributes 1.6% of world emissions, and if we were to reach zero and to hamstring our economy, and if we were to phase out oil and gas, all you'd be doing, as you see is happening in Europe, in Belgium, in Germany, the ones that invest heaviest in phasing out oil and gas are the ones that are paying the most prices to heat their homes, to run their agriculture. You're seeing farmers protest all over against these climate initiatives that they just can't bear the weight of. So, well, it all sounds very nice. If we lower our carbon emissions by 1.6%, but on the other side of the world, they're called developing countries and they're allowed to do what they want according to the Paris Accord, it's utterly futile because we'll see rises on the other hemisphere by 13%. So it is a useless virtue signal that is born on the backs of Canadians that just want to be able to pay to heat their homes in the coldest country you could imagine sometimes.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
So look, the impacts of climate change are real. I believe in the science, and in fact, we've seen the impacts in our own community right here. The last 2 summers, we've had major flooding events that, frankly, we've lost residents in, whether it be in Kings County or Hants County. You know, this was the first fall, frankly, that I had as a member of Parliament that we didn't have a major weather event that impacted the farmers that you mentioned, Greg. So this is a priority. This is something we have to be able to tackle alongside the other issues that we're talking about here tonight. You know, Paul talked about government. This is the only government in the history of the country to have reduced GHG emissions and grown the economy at the same time. And in fact, with the number of initiatives that we have on the table, we do have a credible plan to be able to get to our 2030 target. Alex talks about Canada representing 1.6% of global emissions. Fine, but Canada has never backed down from an international challenge in the work that is necessary. We need to have a government that still takes this issue seriously. Mr. Poilievre, by the way, because the Conservative Canada is not represented here tonight, is proposing to use more taxpayers' dollars to try to reduce emissions as opposed to using the small c Conservative mechanism of an industrial carbon price. It is ludicrous for the Conservatives to suggest that this is the smart way to go about this. It's actually going to cost Canada more to do it, and it's all around the rhetoric on the idea that somehow carbon pricing is detrimental to our economic competitiveness and the ability for us to move forward. So, Greg, we have a program. I'm glad that the consumer price was reduced. It's only 10% of our emission profile. We can get there another way.
Thank you, Kody. Okay, Paul, what actions would you take to ensure the expansion of social services for vulnerable, marginalized populations in Kings-Hants?
Right. Well, as I said before, the basic principle here for the NDP is providing an adequate social security net for all people in this country. We need affordable housing. We would eliminate the GST on essentials, things like energy, internet, and mobile phone bills. We would cap essential grocery items. We would double the disability benefit and increase the guaranteed income supplement. We would work for more $10 a day childcare spaces. We certainly would expand, this is a big thing for us, expand pharmacare and dental care. There was major achievements for the NDP in the last Parliament. Millions of Canadians are benefiting directly from dental care, about 3.5 million right now. It should be up to 9 million. We've got a nice start on pharmacare. That should be expanded. We would start with a list of 100 of the most commonly prescribed medications and support those. And improved employment insurance benefits. Replacement rate up to 2/3 of the former income, and eliminating the wait period as well.
Thank you, Paul. Alex?
PPC believes in social services for Canadians, but introducing the term marginalized decided by who? Decided by the social justice complex that is the actual systemic racism. I look around at Canadians and I don't think of their ethnicity first. I don't think if they're transgender. I don't group them into these boxes, and I find it offensive to innately think that Canadians, without the help of government delineating which racial group needs help, which marginalized group needs help more than another. There are a lot of Canadians. There is a lot of homelessness problem. There is a lot of just average Canadians that are struggling and they need support. And we do need support mechanisms, not based in perpetually becoming dependent on them, but on remedying the situation, on getting people back out and part of society, and treating all Canadians as equals and not subdividing them into social justice units of currency.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
I'm going to use my time to start and talk about what we've accomplished nationally over the last 10 years. We've talked for 50 years about the idea of a national child care program. This government helped deliver it. And although I know there's challenges and we need more additional spaces, this is a key affordability measure for everyday families right here in Kings-Hants, including in East Hants. The Canada Child Benefit, we reformed the way in which we help support everyday families so that, frankly, people that had millions of dollars of income weren't getting the same amount as someone that might be living paycheck to paycheck right here in Hants County. It was the right approach. It's one of the legacy policy implements of this government. We've introduced dental care. Nearly 10,000 residents here in Kings-Hants, including many seniors, benefit from this program. Pierre Poilievre wants to take that program away. I don't think that's responsible. Certainly on pharmacare, we've made initial strides. I think there's more work to be done. The issue I want to cover, though, in East Hants around marginalized, Greg, is transit. We need better transit here in East Hants. This community is growing. Part of this, we've introduced a rural transit fund at the federal level, but we need the municipality and we need our municipal council to say, let's invest in a municipal transit system. I know it's being studied, but this is something that, you know, again, if I have the opportunity to continue to serve, I really want to lean in on this, because whether it's seniors, whether or not it's teenagers, whether or not it's people who don't have access to a car, in order to get to appointments, get to their jobs, these are the types of things that matter for people so that they are able to help contribute, that they're able to make an income. This is what we need in East Hants specifically, Greg. It's more transit, and I want to be a part of it.
Thank you, Kody. Karen?
Yeah, there's lots we need to do, and the Green Part of Canada wants to support people at every stage of their life. If I think about the people I've been speaking to in this campaign, one of them was talking to me about how difficult it was to get childcare. There was 108 people waiting for 8 spaces in the daycare. There were no after-school programs in their community. So this is a family with 2 working adults who are, one of them is going to have to stay home to take care of the children. And so they both want to keep working. So, you know, the plan is to create more space, more trained people for childcare. There's another person I heard from was, you know, about mature students. We had a question the other night. How can they pay for university when so many of these programs are for people for under 30? So you know, increasing programs for mature people as well as younger people in university, and making university tuition free for people. So another is from seniors. They're concerned about long-term care. They're concerned about dental care and pharmacare. So extending those things, putting more funding into long-term care, veteran support. The veterans, we need to speed up the disability benefits process and better transitions from service to public life.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, Alex. In our riding, there are the First Nation communities of Annapolis Valley, Glooscap, and Semaganakity. How do you plan to ensure the concerns of our Indigenous communities are heard?
Well, it's a mess right now because the way that we're dealing with it is, again, subdividing people into preferred groups, and part of the PPC's policy is to revisit the Indian Act and amend it greatly or abolish it and have a new deal where we look at our Indigenous as allies and equal Canadians and stop this divisive mechanism that's been going on with these communities for so long. We have a positive history in Canada, and it's never talked about. We mine history for grievances because that's what pays. Victimhood is a currency, and there is a huge strength in the Indigenous community that is being squandered by gatekeepers that take money, and they'll never fix the problem. They can't fix the problem because then the money stops flowing. What we need is to re-engage with the Indigenous as part of Canada. There is a positive history to talk about. It is not, residential schools does not define our experience with the Indigenous populations in a perpetual guilt loop. There is positive history. Sir Isaac Brock and Tecumseh banding together with Indigenous and British regulars and Canadian militia to get great victories over the United States. There's positive history to celebrate, and I am really tired of this endless victim loop where we just keep feeding parts of Canada, other parts of Canada, and we're never going to get out of it that way. We need to come back to the table and redefine our relationship entirely.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
Look, I think obviously whoever has the privilege of becoming the Member of Parliament, it's a crucial part of the job, and each three of the communities engage with the Government of Canada in a different way, and that's been my experience in the last 5.5 years. But if you want to be a strong advocate for our Indigenous communities, you have to show up. And I was in Sabaganeggity actually today, had a very constructive conversation with Chief and Council, but there's a trust factor there. Because of some of the legacies that has happened over time, many of the Indigenous residents or communities do not necessarily trust their federal representative or the Government of Canada to take their interests at heart. I'm fortunate to have had many strong relationships, particularly here in Sabaganeggity, within Hants County, through sport, through education, going to Hants East Rural High. I think it's a consistency of showing up, building that trust, and being able to work and deliver. I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to build a number of houses in the community, actually, frankly, all three communities, specifically through the Rapid Housing Initiative. But, you know, the conversations we had today was around housing, infrastructure, and making sure that that economic relationship and the opportunity that is available and afforded to our Indigenous communities here in Kings-Hants, but across the country, is at a paramount piece. So that's how I would take it, Greg, is making sure that you show up. Looking forward to being at Annapolis Valley later this week. Looking forward to getting down to Glooscap. You got to be a face that they recognize and that they trust.
Thank you, Kody. Karen?
Yeah, all of us who live in Nova Scotia are treaty people. We sign treaties of peace and friendship. The Mi'kmaq never ceded their territory, so we are living together here in peace and friendship. And the Green Party respects this true nation-to-nation relationship with First Nations. And we support Indigenous self-determination. As far as moving forward, you know, there's things we would act on the call to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, act on every call for justice from the Missing and Murdered Women and Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry. We have fixed the justice system that puts too many Indigenous people in prison, and support Indigenous communities searching former residential schools. It's important to support the Indigenous rights and leadership. There's the UN Declaration on Indigenous Rights to Action. We'll respect those, put those into place. We'll respect Indigenous consent on decisions about their lands, and we'll support an Indigenous-led end to the Indigenous Act. So they're their own people. We would like to work hand in hand, walk hand in hand with them in peace and friendship. It's all about relationship.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
I see this as a very fundamental issue of human rights and fundamental decency. The NDP, you know, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples has the force of law in this country, but too many of its provisions remain unfulfilled. Too many Indigenous nations are living without adequate drinking water and without adequate basic services like education, health care, and housing. We would fully implement the recommendations from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Only very slow progress has been made on that. We would fully implement the recommendations from the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. We would also want full implementation of Jordan's Principle. That is a human rights principle that would ensure that First Nations children have full access to education and government services and cannot be turned down on the basis of who they are. The federal government has stopped court battles with residential school survivors. That was a very unfortunate series of episodes, and I'm really glad that it's not happening anymore. And we'd also favor, in close consultation with Indigenous peoples in the North, making historic investments in health care and developing the economy of the North.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, Kody. How would you advocate for local businesses that may be impacted by tariffs put on Canadian goods by U.S. President Donald Trump?
The one benefit that I have, obviously sitting in the Privy Council right now, is that I do sit on the Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee. So I'll give you examples that if I do continue to enjoy that privilege, part of your work is to be able to take that information, not just from Kings-Hants, but as the Nova Scotia Minister, and be able to take that information back directly to the Privy Council. So, you know, obviously in terms of how you're advocating, you know, when I think about key industries here in this province, not just Kings-Hants, I worry about Michelin. 4,000 jobs in this province that is tied to a supply chain that is North American. As the Americans look to try to renationalize their auto industry, those are really crucial jobs, particularly in Waterville, in the Annapolis Valley area of the riding, that are crucial. I think about our forestry sector, and again, I've highlighted that a lot because I want to be very absolutely clear. This is crucial in terms of us having strong representation for our forestry sector. Matters all across the province, but particularly here in Hants County. And really, Greg, it's taking that information, going back to decision makers, including those that are sitting around the Privy Council, and saying, how do we make sure we put a local lens on the decisions that we're making, while recognizing that we do have to be a national unity front in dealing with the real challenges that we're facing. Thank you.
Thanks, Kody. Karen?
It's going to be, being strategic about responses to the tariffs is going to be crucial. We need to make sure that any retaliatory tariffs are put on things that are not going to affect the local industries and businesses too much. There's going to be many, many impacts to come, and so part of supporting the local businesses would be initiating programs and funding to help them go over the transition or hold them through this transition period till things settle out. Another initiative would be to develop programs for shifts from one kind of business or job or industry to another where it's needed, because, if worse comes to worse and the business needs to shift, there can be transition supports for that. It's hard to come up with too many more specific things, I'm thinking, but definitely decreasing the barriers between interprovincial trade to make Canada more dependent or more independent, and doing things like making sure we have the resources they need here at home instead of being dependent on importing materials to be used in production, keeping our exports right here at home and using them in our own industries.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
Local businesses can be supported. I think we discussed this to a certain extent previously, but again, I would support the idea of using revenues from retaliatory tariffs to support small businesses. We haven't really discussed the issue of trade barriers in this country much in these forums. There seems to be a consensus to sweep those away as much as possible, and that certainly sounds like a good idea, but many of these barriers are there because of vested interests, and various provincial governments have let's say, interest in maintaining these barriers. So it's going to be an interesting challenge to sweep those away. But that's another solution, I think, that would benefit local businesses. Also, we also have an idea for developing a national food strategy, which made this country as self-sufficient as possible in its food supply, developing a secure food supply, and finding markets elsewhere other than the United States. So that would help local farmers. The incumbent always has an advantage in these things because they live in these daily with these programs, and the rest of us have to argue from principles. But that's my answer.
Thank you, Paul. Alex?
Yeah, I think that Canada needs to realize the position we're in right now. We're not in a position to be issuing retaliatory tariffs when 78% or 76% of our exports are going to the United States. To print money, to loan money, to support businesses, to use each additional travesty as an excuse to rely more on your government is the opposite principle of what a government should be doing. What we should be doing is diplomacy. What we should be doing is sitting down at the table. When we know that one of the major sticking points is free trade, and the biggest sticking point on this would be the dairy supply management problem, where we tariff American products up to 300% if they exceed their 3.6% of our market quota, then that's a big sticking point. So we can handle that. We can go to the table with Trump. We can deal with him. I don't like his conduct. I don't like him threatening starting the 51st state stuff, but we don't need to take the bait on this. His style is start at the extreme and work your way back to the middle. If we're using it as some excuse to scapegoat the problems of Canada and be relieved to blame our problems on Donald Trump and say this is the reason everything's going to cost more in the future, we're not doing right by the people of Canada. We have to get to the table. We have to embrace them. The money printer's not going to work to float an auto industry that makes North American cars, 88% of which are going to be sold to America eventually. We got to make good with these guys, and denying the geographic gift that we're given with our relationship with America and squandering it is counterproductive for Canada, to say the least.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, Karen, what are your top 3 priorities if elected?
Oh dear, that is a tough one. My number 1 priority would be getting to know the community here and seeing what their needs are and representing them to the best of my ability. I would want to do that, so that would be number 1. Number 2 is I would want to do that in a way that is provides solutions and supports to them that are socially and ecologically sustainable. We need, I try to, wherever possible, use nature-based solutions to try to make sure that we're not depleting our natural resources that we have here any more than we need to. And the third one would be to do what I can to stimulate value-added and clean technology startups and innovation on the ground here at home.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
Okay, I'm just going to start off with a remark about one of the earlier questions. The current occupant of the White House is a convicted felon. Okay, think about it. So if you're going to use diplomacy with a convicted felon, I wish you luck. I just had to get that out there. Okay, it's not... Okay, I just had to get that off my chest. All right, it was three priorities. Can be personal priorities. I guess it can be. I'm going to interpret it as personal priorities. So, strengthening and making sure that we have a stable public health care system, which is stretched to the limit as it is. It is under threat. I see American corporations eyeing our health care system from various respects. So strengthening our health care system, expanding pharmacare, that includes expanding pharmacare, and continuing the dental care program. That's all under one heading, right? That counts as one? Okay. All right, good.
If you say so.
Good stuff. Two other things. Two other personal things. Like I said earlier, these are issues that are close to my heart. I would want to see continuing support for Ukraine. I want to make sure that Ukraine survives and remains a free and independent state. And I would try to... I studied diplomatic history. That's why I'm mentioning these things, right? I studied diplomatic history of the 20th century and also Gaza, working for a fair, peaceful solution to that horrible war in Gaza.
Thank you, Paul. Alex?
Yeah, I respect your knowledge on world history, but to fund a foreign war and to saber rattle when Canada's at a state of affairs where we can only put one boat in the water and fully crew it, we're at maximum weakness in the book, The Art of War of Sun Tzu. You don't go saber rattling when you're maximally weak and unable to back up your threats. Trump is not walking softly and carrying a big stick, as Roosevelt would have said. He's talking loudly with a big stick. Canada has no stick at all, and we're talking loudly. It makes no sense. These are incoherent policies. Funding a war in Ukraine is, where do we stop with that? It is a war on Russia's doorstep. It is doomed to fail if we keep backing this endlessly. I don't know why every Canadian has to be committed to this as if it's black and white, Ukraine good, Russia bad. There are many disparate groups within Ukraine who are Russian speakers and want to be loyal to Russia. Involving ourselves in this and giving money to a regime that their defense minister has already had to resign amid corruption charges is feeding money into a black hole that Canadians can ill afford right now. So one of my main goals would be to not fund the war in Ukraine. Other than that, it would be an immigration moratorium, and further to that, deporting anyone who has overstayed their visa, made a fake asylum claim, and get homes available by addressing the demand issue. And then thirdly would be abandon the UN commitments that we're locked into. We can't afford the virtue signals, and the ending and saving the planet for that utopia is causing a dystopia in Canada. All the countries that have done this in Europe are now facing backbreaking costs of their energy.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
Okay, I've broken it down. I had a bit of time here. In East Hants, public transit, if re-elected, that'd be something I want to lean in with our municipal council and our MLA, John McDonald. I also believe we still do need sport infrastructure here in East Hants for a growing community. That would be something I'd like to explore with community stakeholders. I want to be a very, very strong advocate for the forestry and the agriculture sector. Again, to our supply managed farmers here in Kings-Hants, the Conservative candidate has not been strong on this, nor has the Conservative Party actually even mentioned agriculture, or have I seen one piece of a policy platform as it relates to agriculture. So if you're a supply managed farmer here in Kings-Hants, I am your champion, and again, the Conservatives have not made very clear whether or not they will stand, or whether or not, at least I'll give Mr. Cargill credit, he is very transparent about where he stands on the issue. In Kings-Hants more broadly, in terms of outside of East Hants, it's continued investment in housing. It would be looking at a sport recreation complex in the Annapolis Valley, which is extremely important, and delivering infrastructure. The housing is one thing, but if you don't have the water and wastewater, as Mayor Peter Matar used to say, it's not sexy, but it's absolutely crucial. We've helped deliver over $75 million in the last 3 years on critical infrastructure here in Kings-Hants. I want to keep championing that. At the national level, let me say, again, if I have the privilege of serving in this capacity, a strong voice in Parliament for agriculture and rural economic development. Thank you.
Thanks, Kody. Okay, tough one. Paul, what can be done at the federal level to improve cell phone service in East Hants?
I don't know. That's my answer.
Thank you, Paul. Alex?
Yeah, I'm sure that Kody would be more well-positioned to give a good definitive answer on this one, but I would say be sitting down at the table and making it lucrative for investors or telecommunications to be doing something like that without intruding too much and using even more of our funds and causing that spending dilemma that we've been in, because it's a reoccurring theme with me tonight, is we're trying to spend ourselves out of spending crisis. And that is like lifting up a bucket while standing in it, and it's not going to happen. So my goal would be, yes, support provincial, support anything that would get us good results, but talk to the experts and make it a lucrative environment for telecommunications to be doing such a thing. Maybe subsidize it for homes that are out of range and in remote spots.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
So look, I'm glad the question was raised. You'll know that when I was sitting on the back bench, I actually launched a petition that was very successful. We had 8,000 respondents, primarily in Kings-Hants, but it actually kind of started to exceed and spill over into Nova Scotia. That information, not personal information, but the data points about where people were feeling, because there's a difference sometimes. The cell companies will tell you, well, no, we do have good coverage here. And then people you actually go to in the area, no, we don't. And it's not just the corridor. It is all along the 215. As I've been campaigning, it's been very frustrating. So look, part of this is an engagement with CRTC, which is the regulatory body. They have almost $700 million that they tariff the telecom companies, and they set aside for rural broadband development. I think that needs to be extended to cell. Our platform is not fully out, but again, I've been advocating for the position that we need to put some public resources on the table to drive more rural investment. But again, East Hants, again, my message to the telecoms is East Hants is not, especially in this area, Enfield, Elmsdale, Lance, this is not rural. This is part of what you need to actually step up and serve. And I think with the ability for government to control the spectrum in this space, we have an ability to be, I think, a little bit tougher. It actually does fall under my portfolio. I had about 7 days on the job. If I have the opportunity on the other side, it'll absolutely be a priority that I want to tackle and chase.
Thank you, Kody. Karen?
Yeah, well, it really is a crucial issue, and it's related to, emergency preparedness and safety and everything else. So it's crucial. Critical infrastructure nationwide is an important part of the Green Party platform. Not only the electrical grid, but the cellular coverage and other internet-related things. So that's part of it, extending the coverage, but not just the coverage, but what type of coverage. There's a need for more consistency in the kind of technology, hardware, and software. We have 3G, 5G, 7G, LTE, and as they're switching over from one to another in one tower, they're, your service on the other band, whatever you have on your phone, gets reduced or cut off while they transition to the newer one. So there's a need for more consistency and a better transition between these developing, always changing technologies. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, our next question is regarding transportation. Nova Scotia is far behind other jurisdictions in providing safe, affordable, and accessible transportation options. How will your party support provincial and municipal governments to improve transportation options in rural communities? Alex?
Provincial and municipal, in terms of what we're doing federally right now, there's too much interference, so more latitude for Premier Houston and the others to not be. There's people that elect a provincial representative for a reason, and giving them the help they need. I know that our policy is to eventually be phasing out equalization payments after getting the energy sector roaring, and we're not in bed with the carbon hysteria that would limit it and leave our natural gas and our resources in the ground. But I would say that not interfering in municipal and provincial, as has been done, as has been raised by the federal daycare and the federal dental and pharma, would be one of the things. So it's less, not more. And the Conservatives are no better with wanting to interfere in municipal and threaten them with funding if they don't build enough houses. So really staying out of their way and letting the divisions of government do their thing is what PBC would advocate for.
Thank you, Alex. Kody?
Greg, I just want to go back quickly because maybe I didn't do justice, certainly on the cell piece. I think what I would look to is the model that we've done on internet, because I remember 6 years ago when I took on to this job, we used to get a lot of calls around internet. I'm not suggesting that it's perfect, but we've moved the needle demonstrably across rural Canada. I think the cell reception could be the same type of principle of what we tackle. On transit, I've talked a lot about building that out here in East Hants. I think it's crucial. One thing you may not know is we have what's called a rural transit fund. I'm proud to have advocated for this as the chair of the Rural Liberal Caucus. It is a $250 million fund over 5 years. We're in year 4 of it. It has supported projects right here in East Hants. The community rider has been a beneficiary, close to $300,000 to help them with capital costs around their vehicles, their rideshare program, or their deployable vans in that space. I think it's a good start, but I do think and I hope that East Hants can look at perhaps more of a publicly funded model, particularly in the corridor, with the ability to kind of have the dispatch model with the community rider where applicable. Those are the types of programs that we've introduced. The Rural Transit Fund has been crucial, and also the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Plan has resulted in public funding on transit across the country. The one recipient in Kings-Hants has been Kings Transit because they have been an established transit provider. But let's look at how we can resolve and challenge that and be able to build out these programs, because East Hants is a growth sector right here in Atlantic Canada. We need to make sure that that program is in place.
Thank you, Kody. Karen?
Very good. Okay, well, we definitely, need to take care of our roads, and in places we may need to add more roads. There may be places where we can take some roads out. We need to be really strategic about the transportation network that consists of roads, and we need to, at the same time, transition away from our dependence on roads and the dependence on the individual vehicle. So public transit is really important. The Green Party has got, a platform that includes high-speed rail coast to coast. We need to reclaim our rail service, our rail transportation. We need to design our communities differently so that we can walk and cycle some places and live and work and produce food and goods in areas that are closer to each other, so we don't have such a dependence on transportation, especially fossil fueled transportation. We can produce more locally and use it more locally. Another aspect is to support Canada Post for developing shipping and improving that so that we can reduce our reliance on American companies, the Amazons and the like, to make shipping for businesses more affordable.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
Well, very briefly, improving infrastructure, or in this country, improving transportation will be part of our infrastructure program, to which we'll be prepared to devote considerable expense and resources. We would emphasize especially environmentally responsible, sustainable transportation, with a heavy focus on electric vehicles, and also, as I mentioned before, rebates and support for families that would buy electric vehicles as well.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, last question. I know you're all disappointed. Kody. Canada faces significant economic challenges due to the internal trade barriers between its provinces and territories. These barriers take various forms, including differing regulations, licensing requirements, and standards, which impede the free flow of goods, services, and labor. How would your party support the reduction of interprovincial trade barriers and ensure greater harmonization of regulations across provinces and territories if you were elected?
Thanks for the question, Greg. And I'll take the question, I'll go a little bit expansive. I actually fully respect that the Prime Minister, when he was sworn into office, did not go right down to Washington. I take Alex's point that the United States will remain an important partner in the sense that we are in a continental economy. 76% of what we produce goes to the United States. But we also have to be very vigilant about reducing our dependency on the United States. I fully believe when I go door to door, that's what Canadians are asking for. Prime Minister was smart to go to Europe. He was smart to go to Paris, to the United Kingdom, and also highlight our Indigenous connection in this country about the foundation of who and what Canada is. We have to look at trade opportunities. We are proposing a $5 billion trade opportunity in terms of export diversification, particularly to Europe, but I also think the Indo-Pacific, particularly in the agricultural sense, is a huge opportunity for us. On interprovincial trade, the Prime Minister has made very clear at the First Ministers meeting, the goal is by July 1st to have no more interprovincial trade barriers. To Paul's point, there might be a few sticking points, but I do believe that the political will is there. I give credit to Premier Houston that he has championed this at the provincial level. I think it's ultimately going to come down to the provinces and territories, but our job as a federal government is to really try to push that conversation, because there's 2 to 4% of economic GDP that is left on the table every single year by us not being able to move in the direction and the policies you just talked about, Greg.
Thank you, Kody. Karen?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit stumped about this one. Yeah, I'm not really quite sure what to say. We are working on reducing the barriers between provinces is a no-brainer situation. I'm not sure what's entailed in doing that. To me, it seems it would be somewhat simple to just break those down, but that's possibly naive, and people are working on it. Beyond that, I'm not sure what to say other than the more that we can increase our economic sovereignty within Canada, it's going to help businesses everywhere in Canada. So becoming more self-sufficient by stronger trades within Canada, building up a strategic reserve of resources that can be used by businesses throughout Canada, and to do it in ways that really does even increase inside province independence, so that there's less need for trade across provinces. So it all comes back to trying to be as locally independent as possible, while freeing up the ability to trade with those that provide things that we don't have and need things that we do have.
Thank you, Karen. Paul?
Right, so there seems to be a national consensus in favor of sweeping away interprovincial trade barriers. That's always a good thing when Canadians can manage to agree on things. But I think we should have a bit of a cautionary note about this. Sometimes this idea gets mixed up with the idea of sweeping away all kinds of things, sweeping all kinds of regulations, sort of unleashing the Yahoo free market, and hoping that will solve our problems. We have regulations in this country not to obstruct business. We should not have a situation where an efficient business or industry is hampered by regulation. But we do have regulations for reasons. We need regulations to protect workers. We need regulations regulations to protect our environment, and we need regulations to protect consumers. So that's just a cautionary note. Like I said, we do have a good national consensus on reducing trade barriers, but don't throw out the proverbial baby with the bathwater.
Thank you, Paul. Alex?
Yep, there's nothing that I really disagree with of what's been mentioned. It's pushing on an open door. Everyone agrees that this should be something where we're following Premier Houston's lead, and it shouldn't be prompted strictly because there's a tariff war that we're all on a crash course for, except for PPC. With America, it should just be free market. It should be, yes, regulations as mentioned, but still, tearing down the barriers to make it easier to trade goods across provinces is just a no-brainer. It makes total sense. And from a free market perspective in PPC, yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, it's now time for our closing remarks, and we're going to go in the opposite direction we did with the opening remarks. So, Paul, you'll lead us off. You have 2 minutes to give us your closing remarks.
Wow. Okay, so in this election, Canada's new, I'm going to go back to the national stage here. Canada's New Democrats are fighting for three things. First of all, our universal public health care, our strong communities, and our belief that no one should be left behind. Trump's chaos will drive up costs and threaten job security, but the NDP is offering real protections and real solutions for working and middle-class people. We've delivered results. Our last parliament saw pharmacare and dental care. We will continue those efforts in the new parliament. We will work for national rent control. I'll get this list through this time. Family doctor for every Canadian, universal pharmacare, grocery price caps, real tax relief for working Canadians, Indigenous rights, water and environmental protections, and accountability from the new government in its negotiations with the convicted felon. I tried to emphasize that my personal beliefs have always focused, and personal values have always focused on human rights and social justice. That's why I'm in the NDP. That's why I'm running in this election. So if by some chance I should be elected, those are the principles that will govern my time in Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Karen?
Yes. So we are in a momentous period in time, not just in our relationship with the U.S., but in addressing the climate and biodiversity crisis. You know, when people talk about this, it's not that people have some idea of some utopia we're aiming for. We're talking actually about the future of life on Earth. It's serious business. Over this next term, we need to meet targets related to planetary boundaries that we may have already overshot, but there's still a chance to pull it back. It's not a frill that we're looking for. In that context, I am keen to champion our local community at Kings-Hants, as well as stand up for our country, working together for sovereignty, peace, and security for Canada and our international allies, promoting affordable housing and food, expanding health care and community care, building responsible communities and economies, and embracing clean energy. These are all things that are important. Reforming the tax system to be more fair, preparing for climate and other emergencies, standing together while sharing the burden and supporting each other through these very trying times. Children, seniors, those with disabilities, each of us together in this room, and respecting and advancing Indigenous rights and reconciliation. All these require governmental actions on many fronts. Whatever the issue, my main priority is to be a champion for the community. Everyone here in the room and online, I thank you for participating. This is democracy in action. It's important. If your question was not raised, feel free to get in touch with me. I'd be happy to reach out to me directly. My fellow candidates, I wish you all the best on the campaign trail and election day.
Thank you, Karen. Kody?
I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you to the Chamber for helping bring us all together today. Thank you to all of you who have come to watch tonight's debate, but also to those online who are tuning in, because it is very fundamental to our democracy. I also want to say thank you to my family, because I have enjoyed the privilege of serving in this capacity for the past 5.5 years, and it is not easy on family. I have my wife here tonight, my mom, my grandmother. I've got a big support system at home, and to all the candidates, I know it's the same thing. When you put your name forward, you got to have people in your corner. So thank you to my family. Look, people vote for different reasons. They vote based on the national leaders, they vote based on the policy platforms, or they vote maybe on the local candidate, maybe a combination of all three. I would submit to you that this is a very crucial time for Canada. I do reject the premise that Canada is broken that you've heard from Mr. Poilievre. I think that actually we have a great opportunity in this country. We do have challenges that we have to tackle together, but I look at this as a real great opportunity and an optimistic time for Canada, but it is crucial. At the national stage, I would submit to you that Mr. Carney, under his leadership and a Liberal government, we are best positioned to handle the difficult waters that Canada faces and the uncertain period that we're seeing around the world. Whether or not it's the plan to build the strongest economy in the G7, build the houses that's needed, defend and protect the social progress that we've made on the programs, or build up the Canadian Armed Forces, because that is something that has been lacking from this debate. That is an absolute crucial piece, particularly in an uncertain world. Thank you to our men and women who serve. Locally here, I would suggest to you, and I hope that you're proud of the work that I've done for the past 5.5 years. I throw everything I can to this job. I want to continue to work hard. I want to be your strong and principled voice in Ottawa. Certainly if the Prime Minister gives me the privilege and we have a mandate, I want to be able to do well for this constituency, this province, and this country. So with that, I humbly thank you for your support and ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Kody. Alex?
Yeah, I'd like to thank the East-Hants Chamber of Commerce. I forgot to say that at the outset. I really do appreciate being invited. There are other PPC candidates that have not been included on this. We have set an Overton window where it's forbidden to have tough conversations, and we keep operating as if everything can be fixed with spending. We're in a spending crisis, and I'm running because I don't hear any other party addressing that. There's tough conversations to be had, and a subsidized media that forbids us from even taking the stage to even have our voices heard, that's a big problem. So while we can talk about this, I want to mention the issues that are facing us. There's wars that are going on that we should not be involved in. There's spending going on that we should not be spending on. We cannot afford to save the world while we're all struggling to even maintain a status quo, to make the decision between paying for groceries or paying for heat. There are many people that are struggling right now. And as we talk about who we're going to spend on, and we're going to address this fire by starting a fire here, everyone is paying the cost of these virtue signals. Everyone is paying the cost. Our cost of living is going up. The inflation isn't talked about, because as you promise spending from one piece of Canada to feed it to the other piece of Canada, you're going to increase inflation. It's all going to come due, and we need to address this, and I believe that PPC will address that. And if selected for Member of Parliament, I can guarantee you that there will be a new narrative opened up, and we will be able to talk about things that have been forbidden from debate. Tough conversations are needed, and just promising that the money printer and the magical genie that we can keep spending and that status quo is going to work for Canada, it's not going to work. Everything's breaking down. I respect Kody. He's a respectable guy, and he's doing great, and he's defended the farmers from his own party's platform because he's exempted them. That is a great thing that he's done. But in PPC, we're not even going to be subscribing to that. Right now, we need to get back on our feet. We need to make this a place that people want to be and be profitable. And thank you again for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you, Alex. Okay, that concludes. If I may, on a personal note, I just want to say that I feel it's commendable that so many people showed up tonight here and online, and have decided not to vote based on social media headlines or slogans, but have decided to get to know your candidates and their views. And for you guys, you candidates, I know this isn't easy, but you guys showed up, you represented your party so well and their views, and you gave us that opportunity, and it means a lot.
Before you, I just want to say, that's okay.
Jump the gun.
No, but I do, before you leave, I want to get a group photo as well. Before, I should have got that before. So anyway, yes, as Greg said, that concludes our 2025 federal election Kings-Hants Candidates Forum. And on behalf of the Chamber and our partner, the Laker News, I'd like to thank all the candidates for putting your name forward and for participating tonight. I'd also like to thank Greg for your moderation tonight. Again, great job again, as always. I'd also like to thank Matt here in the middle for running the technology that I wouldn't want to attempt. So thank you, Matt. Thanks to all of you for coming out tonight. And I'd like to remind you that when, where, and how to vote, please visit electionscanada.ca. You can find all the information you need on there. Advanced polls open Friday from the 18th to the 21st, with Election Day, April 28th. And remember, please remember, your vote matters, your voice matters, so get out and vote. Thank you, and have a good night.